Well, another characteristic of the Romantic period is that the artist, or in this case the poet, would isolate themselves from humanity, in the sense that in London he walks through the city, the widely renowned city of London, as though it were a foreign city, and he'd never even seen it before.
And it sounds like it's like unpopulated, abandoned.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, although he does mention people, he almost speaks of them as though they're not people; they're emotionally distant.
That and draws him away from them even more.
Right. Yeah. And he's a sole person walking through the city of London, pretty much remarking what he views throughout the poem, and that really distances himself through his narrative perspective.
Yeah, and I think coming into London, he kind of notices how restricted the city is, because the Thames is a river, and he talks about how it's chartered like a map. Like every part is recorded, and every part has its section. I don't know, and he keeps referring to the city as chartered, like the Thames, or marked.
Yeah, and that really speaks to sort of the anti-establishment theme throughout the poem of London, in which he, as Catherine said, he remarks that the streets, the river are chartered, and even although he used the word mark in the way that it's like a scar, it can also be interpreted as a mark on a map, in the way that every person, even the people, are simply as predictable as a point on a map. And that's as a result of establishment and rule, especially later established in the second stanza in every ban, which introduces a government control, essentially saying you can do this, you can't do that, and that causes, earlier in that stanza, the cry of every man, infant, every voice, and inevitably the mind-forged manacles, or the shackles that which speculatively can be forged by themselves. They can be forged by any mind, either the government themselves or whoever. It's really speculative throughout the poem.
Well, I mean, look at the mood, and
right.
A lot of the poems that were written in this era related to nature, and when typically when there's relating to nature, the mood would be. It would be upright, it'd be happy, it'd be...
praising.
Yeah, almost praising.
Correct, yeah.
But when it describes a city, or... at that time, being an outcast was looked up to, but when you come into the city, it gives it a gloomy mood. The word choice...
Like blood.
Yeah.
Bloody walls.
Or darkness. I mean, just talking about the settings alone.
It kind of exploits the creations of mankind, and pretty much pointing out all of its flaws, and pretty much saying it's only flaws, and it's nowhere compared to that of nature.
Yeah. Well, and contrary to the regular mood, as Chad was saying, an optimistic mood of, oh, this is nature, this is the creation of God, it sort of, I don't know, ostracizes the creation of man, as Danny said, in the way that to, I don't know, completely juxtapose the optimism of the Romantic era to William Blake's London, which is so pessimistic, in the way that he wanders. In the very opening of the poem, he wanders as though he doesn't know where he is, because he is in the place of man. Yeah. And he doesn't feel like he belongs because it's so unstable, it's so chaotic. Especially as the poem ends off, where he kind of summarizes all of humanity into one event, which he hears at midnight, which is a harlot or a prostitute screaming at a child who is crying, sort of an emphasis or a symbolism of the triumph of evil over innocence through the establishment of a government or organized whatever government or religion.
Yeah, religion. It even says blackening church in there. So
Yeah, and that-
So it's pretty much pointing out the corruption. Of the church.
Well, I mean, you can look at all the images throughout the poem, and I mean, like the chimney sweepers and prostitutes and stuff. They're all things that are only caused by people or governments and societies.
Correct.
And none of them are good things. You know,
Yeah,
like
I kind of think he's saying that like men aren't meant to be governed.
yeah,
Yeah.
like men aren't meant to
We're not-
govern men.
This is how. Yeah, this is the result of
Too much.
being chartered or being on a mark on
Like
the map.
even the church is corrupt. You know, a place that should be pure.
Well, I mean, going off of what Chad said, the way that he elucidates that the church is corrupt is he calls it blackening, and it's he sort of uses a double. He uses a euphemism for a blackening church in the way that he says how the chimney sweepers cry, every blackening church appalls. So the blackening church can refer to the church as being blackening as in more evil, but then again blackening church as when the chimney sweeper cries, it literally gets blacker because when he's crying he's not sweeping the chimneys. And that sort of, I mean, and when he uses appalls, I mean, it can be as though, like, the word appalls refers to, like, being also almost disgusted or even ashamed at something. And the chimney sweep, he sort of puts his 2 cents in by saying it's appalling that that a church, like a sort of, beacon of light and good, uses chimney sweepers.
Yeah.
And, like, it's kind of ironic how the church,
Well, I
a
mean,
beacon of light, is
you
black.
You can see the class structure and how the inequality between, or just in the society through the chimney sweeper, and how the working class is ultimately in sorrow and in fear because they have to work. They can't. They don't have the power over the people in charge.
Right.
And William Blake could be conveying that that's wrong. You know?
So what does this poem say about mankind? Obviously, it's not it's not depicted as great, but
Well, the creations of mankind.
Yeah.
Well, it can
Flaws,
say it can say a lot of things about
yeah,
mankind.
exactly.
I mean,
And that's why I want to know. Like,
well,
that's why I
first-
propose that question.
well, one thing when he as we've spoken about before, the church, he can and the soldier, the hapless soldier sigh again runs in blood down palace walls. That can be sort of shifting the blame of the haplessness, as he says, of humanity on organized establishment.
Yeah.
Government.
Either the church or religion.
Yeah.
However, earlier in the poem, the phrase "mind forged manacles," the mind that creates those could belong to the people. They could, or the mind that forges the manacles could be themselves, that they let themselves be controlled. However, the mind that forges those could also be the church or the government. They forge those manacles on the people. So overall, as to answer your question, what it says about humanity is it could either be that under a government or a church, the church can be oppressive, but also the fault also lies with humanity.
Within the people, like
right.
It's kind of like you brought this upon yourself.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm
And
getting at.
you let yourself fall into this.
So, strained from like governments and societies and mankind's works, what do you think William Blake could be saying about like human characteristics and traits that people should and shouldn't have?
So
Nothing? Okay.
wait. The traits that
So
people should have.
So through London, what by describing London, what's he saying about an individual person, or like how they should act
To be the ideal
not,
individual?
so that to not create this?
Oh.
What
to
what-
prevent this
yeah.
from happening.
what does somebody have to do?
Maybe just not get lost in all the constructs of society and focus more on just mankind and how we were meant to be just naturally.
Well, and another thing is how, I mean, in a successful society like ours that you and I live in, we would never think to. I mean, how it says in the end of the poem, where the prostitute blasts the newborn infant's tear. So she curses this infant for crying, something so natural and innocent. We would never think of that. However, in this society where it's so downtrodden and poverty-stricken and hapless, it's sort of as though people are selfish. They only care about themselves, such as, I mean, the characteristic of a prostitute doesn't really... she only wants money, you know? She cares about her own success instead of her honor.
So
her fame.
greed
Yeah,
is a characteristic that people
definitely.
should stray
Fortune,
from.
materialism.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how else does this reflect the Romantic period?
Well, honestly, I think it doesn't reflect the Romantic period. And
It's
by
almost
not-
like it's
by
an
not-
anti
Yeah, by
romantic imagery.
by
I
not
understand.
by
Yeah.
displaying the exact opposite.
Yeah.
You're displaying how
It like
it should be.
describes the opposite,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it has the same.
Instead of like tranquility, peace, you have chaos and you
Yeah.
have like destruction, and instead of nature, you have mankind, mankind's creations,
Mm-hmm.
and it's an anti like romantic poem,
Yeah.
All right,
which
so
still falls under the romantic category, but it's just a different stance and a different view.
So, how would you guys? We kind of avoided this part. At the end of the third stanza, the symbolism of the hapless soldier's sigh runs in blood down palace walls. How would you guys interpret that?
I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was like, when people, or when there's a society when man is controlling man, people are going to have to suffer for other people's happiness.
There's always going to be
The
conflict.
soldier
There's
for
always
the
gonna
palace,
always going to be
like,
war.
why is it
on the
And there's always
palace
going to be
Mhm.
contrasting beliefs, ideas, culture,
Yeah.
blah blah blah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and another thing is the hapless soldier's sigh.
Somebody's going to get the
He-
short end of the
yeah.
stick.
Right. He's
Right.
well, a sigh kind of signifies that he is unhappy. He's not content with where he's at. You know, and he's sort of a slave, just like everybody else, of the government. And it runs in blood down palace walls, but that
I mean,
also raises the
there's-
question: whose blood?
They're
is
being
it?
sacrificed
Yeah.
for an imperfect society
Uh-huh.
that's just chaos anyways.
All right, so I got a really good question.
Okay.
At least I think
Okay,
it's a really
okay,
good question.
okay, go for
so so obviously this is pointing out like the flaws of like how societies ran and how like men govern themselves.
Mhm.
But without these, well, in the perspective of this time period,
Okay.
how else would you do it? Like how else would you create a functional society if you can't do it like this?
Well, I don't think he's saying that government is totally wrong. I think
Yeah,
he's just
right.
kind of noticing that during the Romantic era, people were really focused on the industrialism and kind of caught up in trying to do that.
The controlling nature of them
Yeah.
is taking over mankind and is corrupting their society, whereas in nature everything just naturally occurred, everything was naturally equal, everyone was happy and could reach their happiness naturally. Whereas with where when you try to control something, many times it's like trial and error, you know?
Yeah.
One and referring to or in juxtaposition of of William Blake's London to other romantic poems is that when a common theme in the both of them is the relationship with man and nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In other poems, when man is in nature, he is one with nature. He is strong. He is present. However, it's kind of the opposite of that, where when man is not in nature, when he is surrounded by his own government, his own rules, his own mind-forged manacles, that he is weak and he is woeful. And that sort of is the opposite of how a romantic poem really is kind of constructed. But, I mean, do you guys really think this is this can be defined as a romantic poem?
I think it totally is defined as a romantic
yeah,
poem.
it's just
It's just
yeah.
the topic, or not the topic, the focus of it
Uh-huh.
is on
Yeah.
something different.
I feel like if you take his ideas, it's almost like you said. It's almost saying like mankind cannot function, mankind cannot live without nature, because the absence of nature is what caused this, basically. And so it's pretty much saying, if we don't have nature, if we don't have this is what will happen. If we govern ourselves and we don't have, this beautiful thing, this peaceful, tranquil thing in our lives, then this is all that's going to come out of it. It's chaos.
Do you guys have any comment on the second stanza in the repetition? In every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, in every voice, in every band, the mind-forged man was I hear. What do you think is the significance of his repetition?
Well, I feel like it's like they're sort of in like a prison, like they're confined.
Correct.
Every
I
person.
agree.
Yeah.
So
everyone's trapped under this whole
Yeah.
thing.
It takes different parts of society and says all these things suck.
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, like
You're right.
everything about
You're
it
definitely
sucks
right.
because it's being controlled, because it's you're taking something that God created and you're trying to change it. You're trying to control it. You're trying to make it different when it was made for, or what many believe to be a reason. It is made for you, is already perfect.
Yeah.
Why destroy it?
Right. God's
Also,
creation is perfect.
in
and,
the romantic
what are you
period
doing?
was in individualism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So like
yeah.
saying every person. So they didn't really. He's not really portraying individualism in the.
He's making
Good
it like a
point.
whole big group
Yeah.
rather than just.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think it's kind of ironic because, as Catherine stated in the beginning, where everything's charted and everyone's kind of like in solitude or ostracized or something. It's
You're correct.
the only time where he references a group or like a community. He's not really saying anything good about it.
Yeah.
So whether you're alone or in a mass, still it affects all of you in a negative way, maybe. Yeah.
And finally, in the last line of London, it says, "And blights with plagues the marriage hearse."
Marriage hearse.
That has a lot of weight behind those words. What do you guys think is sort of the significance of ending the poem like that?
Well,
So when you think of like a marriage, it's supposed to be happy.
It's supposed to be mutual
It's never ending. And especially in this time period, it'd be very religious.
and sacred.
and it's another construct of society.
And so by saying that it's blighted and plagued and diseased, it's
Maybe he doesn't just mean marriage. He's just using that as an example for.
Right.
full
everything.
relation.
Well, yeah, you can take it figuratively, but also literally. A harlot or a prostitute usually sleeps with unsatisfied yet married men.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's true.
And so a prostitute would also blight with plagues being sexually transmitted diseases,
Yeah.
the marriage hearse. So a man would sleep with a prostitute and then bring that home, the corruption. But he also describes marriage as a marriage hearse, so essentially calling marriage dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And therefore we view marriage even today, nearly 100 years later, or hundreds of years later, as sacred and a common human tradition.
Well,
And even that is corrupted by something
Yeah,
so
yeah.
simple.
I mean, like, you're not gonna find a prostitute in nature, right? You're not gonna.
Right.
So it's something that only a society could
Only
bring
we
about.
bring, yeah.
And so, because this society has come together and tried to control things, there's gonna be flaws that come in that ultimately destroy relationships.
It's almost
or-
like mankind is like a famine and is like, and
Good.
it's a famine on nature. It's like we
Yeah.
are bringing burden on our earth. You know?
Well, it's almost like we've taken this, this thing or
It's
earth-
pure.
yeah, this pure,
beautiful.
this thing that's already perfect, that already functions properly,
The way it is.
and we're just messing it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, to conclude, what do you think the message that William Blake conveys through his poem "London" can still be present today? Do you think the same message kind of relates to our society?
Yeah.
How so?
Well, with mankind's innovation and
Right.
and our expansion and our need to just grow, we're taking up the earth. we're destroying all the, like getting rid of forests,
Uh-huh.
cutting down trees.
Right.
And you know that's a more modern standpoint that one could say about that.
I mean, it could go as far as to nature and society relating or portraying something else. Like if I'm trying to control a relationship between me and my spouse, then this is ultimately going to happen. If you have
In a
a
nutshell,
controlling, if somebody has a controlling nature, then it's going to be corrupt. It's going to destroy itself if you're to let it just go as it's meant to be. You know.
And that applies
correctly.
to not only marriage, but you know, our government, our society, our religion.
Definitely.
Yeah. So pretty much everything that has a significant in a person's life.
Yeah.
Well, even though this was written in 1794,
Yeah.
I mean, none of us can say that we haven't been walking down a street and not seen a lot of people with marks of weakness, marks of woe.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're walking down 82nd, or even if you're walking down a street in downtown where there's homeless people everywhere.
Yeah.
You see that effect of, I mean, especially when you're downtown, that effect of big government and that effect of just organized. It's an oxymoron. Organized sort of anarchy
Yeah.
in the way that
Essentially, that's
too
what it
much.
is.
Yeah, too much organization causes dishevelment.
And it's kind of ironic too. 'Cause
Right.
You think organization would bring, you know, kind of like this list that you know everyone follows, that no one steps out of line, but actually like too much of anything
Right.
is detrimental to anyone.
Well, I think that was a really good analysis of William Blake's London. So,
The end.
Amen.